The following film is the video portion of an E6-4 lesson. E6-4 is the computerized curriculum designed for home schools, Christian schools, family worship, Sunday schools, and church Bible study groups. For more information, visit the website at www.e6-4.com.
You're watching Captain Bret's Christian Movie Show.
In Isaiah chapter 49 and verse 15, God asks this question: Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Do you remember the feeling that came over you the first time you held your little baby boy or girl? Do you remember how determined you were to give that child the very best of everything? Every mother wants the best for her children. Unfortunately, however, we live in a culture where we are all expected to depend on experts to help us with the nurturing and training of our children. These experts, the government-certified psychologists, the government-certified public school educators, the government-certified pediatricians, what they all have in common is that they are all required to be indoctrinated in our American university system in order to get their government certification. Each of these experts has received several years of training in an educational system whose foundation is dogmatically religious. But the religion is not Christianity, but rather secular humanism and its blind faith in evolution. The result of this sad situation is that we have an entire generation of young mothers, many of whom are sincere Christians, who are nurturing and training their children in a completely unbiblical manner. Titus chapter 2 tells us to teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can train the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the Word of God. Far from being silent about the issue, the Bible gives us clear directions concerning how our young women are to learn to be good wives and mothers. God commands the church to make teachers out of their older women, the women who have demonstrated their knowledge and skills in the area of being a good wife and mother by the results they have achieved. The church is to facilitate these women training the younger women. But here in America, many churches have totally ignored this biblical command, and the results have been disastrous. Think about it like this. Let's say you're getting ready to plant a garden. Both of your neighbors have gardens, and so you decide to get some advice from one of them and let them help you learn how to cultivate your new garden. So, you walk over to the garden of your neighbor on the left. In his garden, you see a haphazard collection of poor-looking plants, with weeds growing up and choking out many of them. Wild animals have come in and eaten many of the plants. The leaves appear diseased. Insects have eaten large portions of many of the plants, and most of the fruit is withered and sickly in appearance. You pull a piece of fruit and bite into it, only to spit it out because it's bitter to the taste. So, you cross your backyard and enter the garden of your neighbor on the right. First of all, you must open the gate because the garden is securely fenced from predators. As you enter, you see neat, orderly rows of healthy, well-watered plants. The weeds have been carefully pulled out, and there are insect-capturing devices placed in strategic locations. The plump fruit has a rich, healthy color, and as you pluck a piece and bite into it, the delicious taste causes you to break out into a pleasant smile as the juice just runs down your chin. And so, you make your choice. You leave this lush garden, You go back across your yard to the neighbor on your left, and you ask him to teach you how to cultivate your new garden. What, you ask? Are you nuts? Who in his right mind would do a foolish thing like that? How about the majority of American parents? The results of several decades of parents following the advice of government-certified experts is obvious. Rampant obesity, promiscuity and disease among teenagers, teen pregnancies, homosexuality, almost universal disrespect of parents, the use of mind-altering drugs by our kids, most of them administered by their own parents in the form of Ritalin or similar drugs. Folks, the humanist garden is a dried-up weed patch, and yet we continue to bow down to the pagan altars of our universities and government regulatory agencies. But you know what? As a wife and mother, you don't have to follow the crowd. You can choose to obey God's Word and choose to be discipled by older, godly women who have raised fruitful gardens. Women whose children and the children of the other women they have taught and discipled are proof of the effectiveness of their teachings. My wife, Jacqueline, is one such godly woman with a fruitful garden. She has devoted her life to serving her husband and her children, and the results have been very pleasant indeed. I'm going to ask her to introduce this next film, which is a video tool to help the younger mothers to learn from the older. And now, here's my lovely wife, Jacqueline.
I first met Dr. Denmark in 1984. I was a young mother with an infant baby boy. I had been feeding him on demand as I had been taught. I was taught that I could be free from schedules. They were created for people who fed their babies with bottles, and since I was going to nurse the baby, I could just let the baby tell me when he needed to eat. And he seemed to thrive well enough for several months. He was a chubby, happy little baby, beautiful. He was the joy of our lives. But as he approached a year of age, I found that he was not continuing to grow as fast as he should, and he was beginning to have a few health problems. So we sought out the best medical care that we could get. Even though we had no health insurance, we were always able to pay the medical bills. And living up there on the north side of Atlanta, we ended up at Scottish Rite Hospital, the best children's hospital in the southeast, perhaps in the whole country. And the doctors did what they could for him and treated his symptoms, but they could not solve his problems. Until one day, my sister called me up and said, "I'm coming to take you to see Dr. Denmark." Well, I knew of this lady because my grandmother had taken my mother, when she was just an infant, to Dr. Denmark. And Dr. Denmark had been no spring chicken then. Dr. Denmark was in her late 80s at the time. And I soon found out that I literally lived down the street from Dr. Denmark, only about a mile and a half. Dr. Denmark charged me $8 for that visit, but she spent about an hour and a half teaching me how to feed this little boy, and his health problems dissipated immediately. I took him home, fed him exactly the way she told me to do, and he was a healthy little boy from that day on. Within just a few days, he had gained the weight, which seemed to be missing off of his tiny frame, and he has been a healthy little boy ever since. He's behind the camera now, grinning at me, a healthy young man. I'm very proud of him. In the years that followed, I gave birth to 3 little girls in 3 years' time. And as soon as that 3rd little girl was born, we packed up and moved to a foreign place, away from family, friends, and everything I'd ever known. I couldn't speak more than a handful of words in Spanish, and certainly could not cope in the foreign place where we were at. But I had 3 baby girls to tend to, as well as my handsome little boy, who was now just as healthy as a horse. And if it had not been for Dr. Denmark's excellent advice, putting me on the right road, I wondered just how bad the health of my young children could have been during those years that followed. But instead, it was quite easy to have 3 little baby girls in the house, and they were just healthy as could be. I fed them on a schedule and came to love the method that Dr. Denmark had taught me. Dr. Denmark always told me that the baby did not know what he needed, and that I had to be the smart mother who made a plan and cared for the baby and met his needs in a proper fashion. At that first visit with Dr. Denmark, she drew me a diagram of the baby's stomach and showed me that if I put fresh milk on top of undigested milk, even if it was my good milk that my body provided for my infant, that my baby would have digestive problems, that things would not go well. And that was a revelation to me. I simply was unable to figure that out on my own. And I had been nursing my baby for long periods of time and picking him back up to nurse him whenever he cried. But I was so grateful to learn that I, as the mother, was smarter than my baby, and I did know now what to do, and I had a good plan, and I could have a happy home. My husband's needs could be met because I could plan when I was going to prepare and serve his meals and meet his various different needs, rather than simply being at the beck and call of an infant who did not know what he needed and when. This video, The Well-Fed, Well-Rested Baby, will teach you the things that Dr. Denmark spent so many patient hours teaching me, Wendy and Tammy, and many other mothers like us, how to care for your infant, how to have a happy baby, a happy home, a happy husband. Very important things here. I think you'll enjoy it.
Don't you just love the change of the seasons? I think my favorite time of year is the fall, with the crisp colored leaves, the cool mornings, and that first cup of hot cocoa in front of a warm fire. Well, for a woman, one of the first major seasons of change in her life is when she becomes a mother. She gets that nursery ready, gets that first maternity outfit, feels that miraculous first movement of the baby within her, and waits for the day of the birth. For some, this transition goes very smoothly, but for others, it can be very traumatic. So whether this is your first baby, you're the mother of many, or maybe you're a single mom, we here at Mother to Mother want to provide training and encouragement to make this season of motherhood one of confidence and blessing. I'm Wendy Eccles, and I'll be your host. Welcome to Mother to Mother. Well, I am really excited about this particular session at Mother to Mother. We are going to be highlighting a dear friend of mine and a wonderful mother. She's also a grandmother and a great-grandmother, and just happens to be one of the oldest and longest practicing pediatricians in the United States, Dr. Layla Daughtry Denmark. She was born in 1898 and just finished practicing in the year 2004 at the age of 104. At this session, we are going to be highlighting the first few chapters of her book, Every Child Should Have a Chance. These few chapters have very specific distinctives about newborn care, and I think you'll find these very helpful. Well, Tammy and I want to tell you how we personally met Dr. Denmark, because meeting her has really changed our lives and changed everything we do about mothering. And we owe a lot to her, and so we want to really highlight a lot of the things that we learned from her and pass on to you. But I met her back in 1989. I was expecting my first baby, and I was very excited. And I don't know how it is with you girls, but once I got pregnant, I started noticing every other pregnant woman that walked around. And I also began to notice babies and how other babies acted. And I began to see a pattern with some of the mothers that I went to church with of children that were doing really well. They were good eaters, they were good sleepers, they just looked like the most content little happy things. And so I began to ask a lot of questions, how they got that to happen. And the common thread among all that was the word Dr. Denmark. Mm-hmm. And they also said, she's very old, you better go see her fast. I think she was 89 at the time, and I thought, she is going to die before I even get up there to visit her. So I called her on her day off, which was Thursday, and went up there, and she spent hours with me instructing me on what to do when that baby was born, because I was 7 months pregnant at the time. And she gave me her book, Every Child Should Have a Chance, and she began to coach me through specifics on how to have a successful experience with my baby. And little did I know that I was going to go on and have 7 children in 11 years, and how much I was really going to need that advice, because it's been wonderful. And so, Tammy, when did you meet Dr. Denmark?
Well, I met Dr. Denmark in 1996. We had gone through a period of infertility, and at last there was a baby, and I was so thankful at the prospect of becoming a mother. Well, I read everything that I could get my hands on because I just wanted to be that good mother that I've dreamed of being, and I found that there was a lot of conflicting information out there about different ways to do it just right. But the baby came, and quickly we went from this exciting time of getting to be a new mother with a new baby to this time of no sleep, baby crying all the time. And I was trying everything and nothing was working. Feeding every 2 hours and up every night and on for weeks and weeks. And that just got very tiring and trying very fast. And a friend, Elaine Strickland, came over to visit our new baby to see her, and we were trying to talk while I'm bouncing this screaming baby, and she said, "Do you have this baby on a schedule?" And I laughed and said, "Well, she has me on a schedule. She cries and I jump and she cries, and I feed her and she cries, and I change her." I'd never heard of having a baby on a schedule. And so she quickly called Dr. Denmark on the phone and got some information for me and got me headed down the right path. And Macy at that time was 6 weeks old and was still crying all night, and within 4 nights on the Dr. Denmark schedule, she was sleeping all night.
Isn't that great?
And a good night's rest will sure make a believer out of you.
That's right. And so it's amazing how quickly that things settle down when the routine is put into practice. So when my little Emily was born on Christmas Day of 1988, things began to happen very smoothly, very quickly. I was able to start the schedule in the hospital and continue on as I got home, and she was sleeping through the night in just a few nights, and it was wonderful. And I had a great time with my infant those first 6 months. And when we happened to be in Colorado with Campus Crusade for Christ that next summer, when my first baby was just 6 months old, and I had women coming up to me and asking me, "How come you're having such a great experience with your baby? She seems to eat well, sleep well," and they were going crazy. And so these missionary moms in this training session over the summer asked me if I would teach them what I know. And so I called Dr. Denmark, and she coached me through the outline of that first class I ever taught back that summer. And she mailed me 40 books, and I ended up selling out every book I had, doing 2 sessions, and it was just that good advice. People were so hungry for it. And I think as we see, we're giving these little babies this new life, and so often what goes from an excitement for the baby to chaos. And Dr. Denmark's distinctives change all that and really bring a lot of peace and settling to the home. And so before we get started any further, I want to show you a little biographical video on the life of Dr. Denmark.
Beautiful flower garden, and we'd take flowers to the teacher, and when the day was finished, the teacher would throw the flowers out. Well, I would wait till the teacher disappeared, and I'd go pick up the flowers, take them back home, cut the stems off, put them in water, to see them lift their heads again, to see life come back again. And yet my mother had worlds of flowers, but I couldn't stand to see those flowers die. So that's been my philosophy all life. We should never take life. My name is Leela Alice Daughtry Denmark. I'm 89 years old. I'm a pediatrician for 60 years. I was born in Bullock County, South Georgia, on a big farm. And my father was a very fine farmer. We had all kinds of animals on the farm. If a little chicken or something got hurt, I would always be fixing them up. When I was 6 years old, they built a railroad through my father's farm, and we had lots of cattle, and the little calf must have been sleeping on the railroad track, and they cut the calf's tail off, almost one section of the bone, of the backbone. My father brought the little calf in, and he said we'd have to put the little calf to death. And I said, "Oh no, let me have that little calf." So I made me up some salve. I used some Octagon soap, sugar, iodoform, a little turpentine, fixed me up a nice concoction, and every day I'd go out there and work on this little calf. And you know, that little calf healed, I got well. It was the funniest looking cow you've ever seen in your life. Actually, there was nothing there that ever resembled the tail, and grew into the biggest cow. And when he got grown, of course, those days money was money, and my father sold him for $15. So that type thing I was always interested in, bringing life back. If you read the history of medicine, women have been doctors all the time. But as far as this part of the country, women or ladies, they didn't go out in the public to make a living, you know. When I applied, they didn't even answer my application. And I decided to go over to medical school and talk to them about it. And I got over there and they said they had 52 boys and they couldn't take anybody else. And I said, well, you know, I'd love to go now if you can work it out. And they said, well, you can wait till next year and apply and maybe we can get it in. I said, no, I'd love to go this year. And I was the only girl in the class, 52 boys.
Well, you can certainly see after watching Dr. Denmark's bio why she would title her book, Every Child Should Have a Chance. Because she believed that every mother that came in her office had an opportunity to give that child in her arms a chance at a better life. You know, we all have different and varied backgrounds. Some of us had great childhoods, some of us did not. But when that baby is placed in our arms, we have a new beginning. We have an opportunity to give that child a chance. And so that was her life message, to equip every single one. And you know, the wonderful thing about it is when you went to see Dr. Denmark in her office, she didn't try to get you in and out in 15 minutes. There were times where she would spend an hour or an hour and a half with me in the office. And if you went to her for the first time on that first visit, which a lot of what we're teaching you in this particular session is exactly what you would get in that first office visit with her. She would show you how to bathe the baby, how to hold the baby, when to feed the baby, how to feed the baby, every particular detail, and she would act like you were the only person in her waiting room. And she would always take a newborn in. If you walked in the door and you had a brand new baby in your arms, no matter if 20 people were in her office, she always took the newborn next, because she felt like they needed to get home, back into their safe environment away from sick people. So it was a real treasure. When you went to one of her appointments, you went home trained. You knew what to do with that baby. And so that's really what we want to pass on today. And so let's see how we begin. So if you were to go into Dr. Denmark's office and you had that newborn in your arms, the first thing you would want to know is, you know, how am I supposed to feed this baby? How am I supposed to sleep it? What am I supposed to do? And that's when you would begin with that first little baby in your arms. And the basic method that she uses is the routine that you have in your hand, that flyer that you have in her hand. And why does she use a routine? A lot of people say, why does Dr. Denmark use a routine? Because so many of the philosophies out there are demand-based. That means if the baby cries, you do something to it. If the baby cries, you feed it, you do this, do that, and you're juggling that baby all day long, trying to figure out what the baby wants, what the baby needs. And Dr. Denmark basically says that baby is not born knowing what it needs or when it needs it, and that's the job of the mother, to be educated and trained so that she could properly care for that baby. So the basis of putting your baby on the routine is based on the physical needs of the baby, the actual dietary needs of the baby. Because when you feed a baby a good feeding, nursing or bottle, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, the digestion time is 3 complete hours. Let's say, for example, you have a baby in your arms and it takes you 30 minutes to get through the feeding. Then it takes 3 hours for that milk to digest, and then an extra 30 minutes to build up a little bit of a hunger so that they have a good feeding the next time. And that is the basis for this schedule, is the actual feeding and digestion time of the baby. And that is her goal. Her goal is to train you to do proper food and proper rest at proper intervals, with lots of hugs and kisses in between. She was a very affectionate mother. She was a very affectionate pediatrician. She loved on each of my children every time we went in the office. And so let's look at that schedule. As you can see, the basic schedule is at 4-hour intervals, which again is based on the emptying time of the stomach. So we have the 4-hour schedule. We have basically a half-hour feeding. We have a 3-hour digestion process, and we have a half-hour for that baby to develop an extra little hunger so it eats well at the next feeding. And so look at that more detailed, and we're going to go over that specifically because this is the base of what you would do with a baby birth to 3 months old. Let's say, for example, you'd start your feeding at 6 a.m. in the morning. Now, Dr. Denmark says it only takes 10 minutes per side if you're nursing an infant. You know, you've heard some mothers say, well, it takes me an hour to feed the baby. It just wants to keep on feeding and feeding and feeding it. And Dr. Denmark says, after 20 minutes, a 20 or 30-minute feeding, your milk is basically gone, or the bottle should be empty, and you should move on to the next part of the schedule. Mm-hmm. So you have a feeding that is lasting 10 minutes per side, or 20 minutes, and at that feeding in the morning, you know, you would also change the diaper, you would check for soiled clothes, and you would make sure the baby's comfortable, and then you put the baby right back to bed at 6:45 or 7 o'clock. And for then that next 3 hours until 10 a.m., the baby sleeps in a bassinet on its tummy. Mm-hmm. Now, the position of the baby is very important, and we're going to be discussing that in further detail because that is a real controversy in the medical field today. I guess Dr. Denmark would call it a fad. In the last 50 years of medicine, they've changed the prescribed position of the baby, the sleep position of the baby, and she has stayed true to that the baby needs to be on its tummy during sleep time. And of course, the sleeping area should be dark and clean and quiet and smoke-free. And the reason why it's dark, you know, a lot of people, you hear them say, well, you should put the baby in the middle of the room and vacuum around it and adjust it to noise and light and life. And Dr. Denmark says the sleep time is not the time to do that, or is that the time the birth to 3 months. The baby's senses are very sensitive to noise and to light, and you should protect that. You don't want to startle the baby or cause it to be uncomfortable. So we want to keep that first 3 months with the baby a clean and quiet environment. So your next feeding time would be at 10 a.m. And again, you would feed it either 10 minutes per breast or use a bottle feeding. And then right back down after a change of diapers. And you know, that was always such a wonderful time after you have a baby, and some of you I can see are expecting. You'll realize that you have a weariness that comes over you just from the act of delivering the baby. It's a kind of a different kind of weariness that you really don't feel any other time of your life. And Dr. Denmark's schedule not only is great for meeting the needs of the baby, but the needs of the mother, because you're able to feed that baby at 6 a.m. and what do? You put it right back to bed. The baby goes to sleep, and you get to sleep, and you get to recover from having that baby, which is so important because Dr. Denmark cared about the recovery of the baby and the recovery of the mother. And so, again, the baby's going right back down in a bassinet in a quiet, clean area on its tummy. And at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, when you pick the baby up for that feeding, that's when the schedule begins to change a little bit. You go ahead and give it the feeding, as you see on the schedule, and then it's a playtime out in the open. From after that feeding, which is around 3 to 6 in the afternoon, you are to pull the baby out in the open. You can take it for a walk in a stroller. You can put the baby on a clean pallet, and a pallet is simply a layer of cotton blankets laid in a safe place. Now, if you have dogs or other animals in the house, you may want to invest in a playpen and make sure that that pallet time is in a safe environment. But if you don't, you could just lay the baby anywhere just to make sure that the pallet is clean, it's made of cotton, and you're laying that baby on its tummy until it gets strong enough to start moving over itself. And so during that afternoon time, that 2 to 6 time in the afternoon, the baby is to be kept out in the open, not in a dark bed or a dark environment, and you should expect some fussing and some snoozing. The baby can do a little natural sleeping during that time out in the open, that's fine, but you're also going to begin to hear what Dr. Denmark calls is the developmental cry time, and Tammy is going to beautifully explain to us why it's okay to let a baby cry. But during that afternoon time from 2 to 6, the baby is out in the open, expect some snoozing, expect some fussing, but that's a really important time because what do so many mothers talk about? Oh, my baby has its daytimes and nightimes confused and it cries all night long. Well, Dr. Denmark's distinctive, what I'm about to tell you now, is how you train a baby not to be confused about that. You give it a crash course in what daytime is about, and it really starts after that 2 p.m. feeding when the baby is out in the open. And so as you see, the next feeding would be at that 6 p.m. time is the feeding, and the important time of day in teaching the baby to sleep through the night later is to keep the baby awake between the 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. feeding. That is time where it learns to be awake, and the wonderful thing about it is while it's awake, it's going to fuss, as Tammy's going to talk about, it's going to cry, And my husband used to always call that the baby aerobics hour. You know, someone would call about 8:30 or 9, and the baby would be crying in the background, and they'd go, "Don't you need to do something to that baby?" And he said, "No, the baby's been fed and taken care of. The baby's just doing its aerobics session, so it'll sleep for the night." And sure enough, it did. So during that 6 and 10 p.m. Time, keep the baby awake, expect a little fussing, play with the baby, enjoy the baby, snuggle the baby, let other people, if they're well, come over and play with the baby too. Give the baby a bath during that time. And then at that 10 p.m. feeding, make sure it's a good, solid, hearty feeding, and put the baby down for the night. And so some tips at the bottom of that page are keep baby away from sick people. Dr. Denmark says a lot of times these days people don't realize the importance of protecting the immune system of the baby. That first 3 months is key in building a strong system so that baby can battle other illnesses later. So keep the baby in a quiet, clean environment away from sick people. Another bit of information is starting with week 2, the baby should gain about 1 ounce a day for 3 months. And the reason why we say week 2 is right after the baby's born, it's very normal for that infant to lose weight the first week. And you're not to be alarmed by that. The baby is just adjusting to its new environment. It's adjusting to the feeding pattern. And so it usually takes about 7 to 10 days for the baby to gain back to its birth weight. And from that time on, the feeding should give the baby about 1 ounce a day of weight gain. And after 3 months, it drops down to a half an ounce. And so that's always important for a new mother to learn, because I get a lot of calls, and Tammy probably does too, from new mothers wanting to know, is my baby getting enough food? Is my baby gaining properly? And if you'll give this baby a proper feeding, you will find that they will just gain and they'll do wonderfully. Another tip Dr. Denmark always emphasizes was don't be in a hurry with the feedings, and don't be a bottle propper. You know, that cuddling that you do with that baby, holding that baby close, whether you bottle feed or nurse, is an important time of intimacy and bonding with that baby. And it's very important that you not just prop the baby up with some pillows and give it a bottle, because God's natural way of nurturing that baby is in the arms close to the mother. So don't be in a hurry with those feedings. Take the time and make sure that baby takes every bit of that food until it's full. And it's very important that the baby gets proper caloric intake during the day. That means a good feeding at 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m., and 10 p.m. Because as the caloric intake builds up over the day, then when that baby is put down at the evening, that last feeding after 10 p.m., you know it's had all the calories it needs to make it through the night. So don't rush those feedings. Take that time and really nurture that baby and feed that baby well.
Wendy, I can remember when Dr. Denmark taught me this schedule, and my surprise in learning from her that babies sleep 20 out of 24 hours when they are first born. And I just feel like that's God's gift to a mother who's trying to recover from having a baby. But babies really need a lot of sleep. So when you first look at this schedule, you might think, I don't really believe that you can feed them and put them right back down, and feed them and put them right back down, and then they'll still sleep all night. But it is so true. And a baby without enough sleep is going to fuss extra.
Right.
They need proper rest. And another thing, the 6 to 10 p.m. time, when you're talking about keeping that baby awake, that's really the only work time of the day. If you are feeding that baby, loving on it, changing its diaper, and putting it right back down for a nap, that's just a small thing, and you're right back to your rest or your house duties, cooking your meals, whatever things a mom needs to be doing. And really, it's not until that 6:45 to 10, we called it fussy 30 because that's always when ours fussed, but it's such a small part of your day that you can really commit to keeping that baby awake. And making sure that what you do in that little block of time is going to make for a peaceful night for the whole family. So what you do in the daytime does affect the nighttime.
It does affect the nighttime and daytime are a puzzle that fit together. So the proper food during the day and those good naps, see those good naps in the morning help give the baby enough energy to be awake in the afternoon, so the baby can be awake in the afternoon to sleep at night. So it works together beautifully. And also, I know one thing I did as a new mother is I put the schedule right on my refrigerator, and that way my husband or my mother or whoever was helping with the baby, we were all on the same team. And so the beauty of the schedule is it helps get everybody knowing exactly what to do with the baby. So when other people do help you, you can all keep doing the same thing, keep that baby on track. Let's go back to what a feeding means, because I know Dr. Denmark, she says it's great to nurse, and certainly you'll save a lot of money and time if you can nurse, but some women just either have difficulty with that, or with their life situation they just need to use a bottle. And so Dr. Denmark has a few tips to help that bottle feeding go well. She also suggests starting with a soy-based formula, because very oftentimes cow-based formulas, that dairy product, that macromolecule that's made for a baby cow, which is very hard for little infants to digest, can sometimes cause a lot of digestive problems and gas for the baby. So she would suggest starting with a soy-based formula and to add a little bit more water than the formula actually calls for. She said a lot of modern-day formulas really have a little bit too high a fat content for the baby's digestive tract. So a lot of the formulas will say 1 ounce of formula to 1 ounce of water, and she says go ahead and add 1.5 ounces of water to the 1 ounce of formula. And that will help the baby be able to digest that food better. And actually formula takes a little longer to digest. It takes about 3.5 hours. So again, it's going to take that full span of that feeding to digest that food. Dr. Denmark is also concerned about the nipple size on the bottle, because a lot of times you buy, especially the cheaper bottles, and they'll just have one little bitty pinhole at the top. And Dr. Denmark says that is too hard and too much work for a newborn to have to suck that hard to get milk out of that one little hole, because a woman's breast has several openings and more milk is expressed in a quicker way. So when you get that bottle, if you're going to be using one, make sure you take a little steak knife or something, go up through the bottom of the bottle and cut a little X, about a 1/16 of an inch, is that right? At the top. So when the baby takes the milk, it comes out faster and it doesn't wear their little jaw out, just overwork it from a difficult feeding. So you want to make sure, if you're bottle feeding, try a soy-based formula first, water it down a little bit, make sure your bottles and nipples are clean, but also make sure that nipple is a little bit opened more. Now I also noticed one of the latest things is you can buy nipple sets that have different size openings. These weren't out when my babies were coming along. So you can actually buy sets with different size openings, and so you would just use the larger opening in that set if you happen to get one of those. And so let's go back. We've talked about the feeding a little bit, and now the ever important issue of sleeping. And Tammy is going to show us Dr. Denmark's distinctive on how to make up a bed for a baby and make sure that the environment is safe and clean.
Okay. Well, it is important that you make up the bed properly, and we'll show you how to do that. Well, Dr. Denmark has a reason for everything that she teaches, but it's always just common sense. So I'll explain to you why we make up the bed the way we do, but your new baby may be sleeping in a bassinet right beside of your bed, or you may have a crib, but either way, on the rubber mattress, you're going to want to lay down 4 towels. So I just, on a bassinet, I've always just used 4 little hand towels, and we just lay them out to cover up that mattress. Now the purpose of the towels, as you can probably guess, is that the baby will do some spitting up. And if it spits up on just the rubber mattress, it'll just be laying in it. But the towels are absorbent. And so once the baby spits up, it'll just draw it into the towels, and that way the baby won't be laying in that. We always want to take a 100% cotton sheet and stretch it over the towels and the mattress. And Wendy, I've heard Dr. Denmark say so many times it needs to be tightly stretched.
It is very important that the surface of the bed be very smooth with no objects in the bed whatsoever. No cuddly little cute stuffed animals given by grandmother or auntie. We want to make sure that the bed is clear of objects. You just want the tightly made bed in there, and that's it.
Right. And we just take this and put it right in the bassinet, and that makes a great sleep surface for baby.
So you saw the practical way that Dr. Denmark encourages us to make up the bed. And the next important step is how to put that baby in the bed. And I have never seen something as controversial as whether to put the baby on the back, on the side, to rotate it from side to side, or to put it on its back. And Dr. Denmark has remained absolutely firm that the best and safest position for a sleep position of a baby is on the tummy. And one of the reasons that Tammy spoke of is when the baby is on its tummy on a surface that is 100% cotton and very tightly and very well made. When the spit up comes out of the mouth, it can absorb right into those natural fibers. And all babies I know usually do not swallow that last little bit of food. You know, they take a full feeding, and those last couple of swallows they begin to get very relaxed, and that food kind of stays in their throat. And if you lay a baby on its back to put it right back to bed, there's a chance that that baby could choke. So it's very important for the baby to be on its tummy so that food, as they drift off to sleep, that milk can just absorb right into those cotton towels. So it's very, very important. Also, the tummy sleep protects the integrity of the head. There's been several head deformity clinics have to open up around the country because of these different positions of the baby. When a baby is on its back, that soft areas of the head can go flat. And even though Dr. Denmark says that doesn't affect the intelligence of the baby, it does permanently affect the shape of the head unless it has some type of repair or go to the doctor at some point to change that. So the tummy sleep protects the shape of the head. It also promotes that really warm, snuggly feeling. You know, Dr. Denmark said when a baby's in the womb, it's as tight as a tick. And when it comes out, it needs to preserve that safe, secure feeling for a while until it adjusts to the world. So by keeping it on its tummy, it's able to snuggle in and keep that secure feeling and prevents the startling mechanism. She said when you take a baby that's been tight as a tick in the womb and the first thing you do is lay it on its back, what does it want to do? It wants to scream and holler because its arms and legs are flailing back for the first time. It startles, it swallows air, then the mother panics and thinks, oh, it's hungry, and she tries to feed it. So air upon food under stress promotes a lot of these colic issues and a lot of this gas, and the baby just screams more and more in pain, and it's a cycle that doesn't stop. The baby's startled, she tries to feed it, it gets gas, it swallows air, and then you have these babies that are called, well, my baby's colicky, you know, and it won't stop being colicky. Well, a lot of times you can just simply prevent that by feeding the baby at properly intervals during its actual physical needs for food and putting the baby on its tummy where it can get nice and comfortable. Another thing that a baby can do when it's on its tummy is it can self-comfort in the night. If it starts to stir and wiggle in the middle of the night, it can simply put its thumb in its mouth. And Dr. Denmark said it's much cleaner to put a thumb in your mouth than those dirty pacifiers out of our purses that we yank out. She said you don't even need to use a pacifier. Let the baby self-comfort with its thumb. I've had some children self-comfort with the two middle fingers because she says the thumb is bathed in natural antibodies all the time. It's actually much cleaner than anything you could pull out of your purse or diaper bag. And so that's really important too. Also, you'll find that when the baby is put on its tummy to rest, it will naturally want to move itself and exercise. And it will scoot and scoot and scoot until its little head is just barely touching the top of the crib or the bassinet. And that's an important security measure too, is for the baby to get in a snuggly position. And so I'm going to read you also a few paragraphs from Dr. Denmark's book on the importance of tummy sleep. Because it's such a controversial topic, I want to make sure you fully understand her reasoning behind it, because you're probably going to hear this topic brought up in a lot of different mothering circles. Some of her comments on this are rather humorous. This is from page 8 of her book. She says, there is no animal on earth dumb enough to place newborns on their backs except man. This little baby has been held tight for 9 months, and when he is placed on his back, his hands and feet go free and he feels like he is falling. He will grab for help that is not there and become startled. With this shock, he takes in a deep breath, swallows air, then has the colic and cries. This is kind of what I referred to earlier, causing more air to be swallowed and more colic. When he starts to fall asleep, his arm and foot drops and he is frightened again. And also, she says, if placed on his back, he is helpless since he cannot move around over the bed and get comfortable as he could on his abdomen. And he cannot use his neck if he's on his back also. You know, when a baby's on its tummy, well, the first thing it wants to do, that first little skill, is lift that head up and down, and move it side to side, which prevents the baby from having that droopy neck syndrome that you see so many babies have for so long. Your baby's neck will get so strong so fast just from letting it be in a position where it can exercise. It'll also, the baby will want to do baby push-ups. You'll see them go, start to do this, because one of the first major motor skills they'll do is the crawling skill. And so these little baby push-ups that you even can see a newborn doing, is an important skill that they need to learn.
And it'll come so much earlier because you're
Right.
sleeping the baby on the tummy,
Right.
because those muscles along the back all the way up to the neck will just build so fast
Right.
that you'll be amazed at how strong your baby will be so fast.
And she says all babies swallow air the first 3 months of life, and this air does cause colic. And if a baby is on his back, the colic is much, much worse. Anyone who has ever had a tummy ache or colic knows the relief that the baby can have by being placed on its tummy, where it can just lightly bounce. As it's uncomfortable, the baby can lightly bounce, and it actually bounces the air out. So it really helps relieve a lot of that pressure. If the baby is kept on his abdomen, his head will always have a good shape. The occipital bone in the back of a little baby's head is not united with the other skull bones yet. And if the baby sleeps on his back, this bone will be forced in and his head will become flat in his back. Also, as a review of what I said earlier, on the abdomen, the mucus that accumulates in the nose and throat comes out on the soft cotton covers and will not strangle the baby. Every organ in the human anatomy of that baby works better on the tummy sleep. And so as you hear those controversial words out there about what position, Dr. Denmark has remained firm, and she says that is not what caused SIDS. A lot of those SIDS studies that she even mentioned in her book are caused by babies that are placed improperly in the bed or with some improper thing in the bed. Even one thing she mentions is babies who are put on sheepskin, something that's too thick for them to breathe through. Because the baby will be able to breathe on that smooth cotton surface, the baby will naturally begin to turn its head side to side. And even if the baby puts its nose down on the mattress a little bit, Dr. Denmark says the nose naturally is pressed down and flares out to the side and still breathes. So as long as you have a good, firm, straight, tightly made bed, the baby on the tummy position will do just great. And so that is something that she makes a big issue about, because she really believes that is the best developmental position for the baby.
The film you have just watched is the video portion of an E6-4 lesson. E6-4 is the software curriculum that provides education with a strong biblical worldview. Be sure to visit the website at www.e6-4.com and sign up for our newsletter to stay informed about new lessons available or special events. One of the many features of E6-4 is the student-directed learning mode, where the student is free to choose from dozens of lessons in over 20 categories, including math, reading, history, science, and the Bible. Another feature is the father-directed learning mode, where a father or classroom teacher can create an individualized lesson plan for each student, and the software will teach the student one section at a time, keeping records of his progress. A third feature is the family worship mode, which is ideal for family worship, school chapel services, family Sunday school classes, or church Bible study groups. Once you set up your lesson plan, this mode offers instruction and catechism, one lesson section at a time. Reminds you to do prayer, Thanksgiving and praise, Bible memorization, and includes a complete music section with songs and hymns for worship. Each song can be played with or without the vocals. Another E6-4 feature is the competition mode, where you create a lesson plan and the program randomly selects question sets from the lessons to create a fun and exciting competition, which can be as small as the competition our family does every day in our daily family worship, to as large as the Southeast Bible competition we conducted with multiple rounds and prizes, including a new laptop computer and tickets to a major theme park. Another feature is Apples of Gold, a computerized parlor game for more advanced students, where two clue givers devise clues to help their teams come up with a phrase from the Bible. To purchase the E64 software, visit the website at www.e6-4.com. To schedule the Homeschool Advantage to come to your church or homeschool conference and teach your people how to use computer software to build strong biblical households, contact Captain Bret at 678-570-2195 or email terabenth@inbox.com.